He was trained to walk into a crowd and kill on command. But instead, he walked up my porch bleeding, silent, and carrying a dying pup in his mouth. That was the morning everything I buried came back. My name's Malik Turner. 4 years ago, my son died in a classified military accident. They said it was a test gone wrong. What they didn't say was that it involved one dog, him, and now he stood at my door like he remembered me, like he'd come back, not to finish the mission, but to be forgiven. This isn't a rescue story. It's about a weapon that refused to stay one, about a soldier with fur, and about the moment a father had to decide, do I hate what took my son, or love what's left of him? If this caught your breath, hit like, drop your country in the comments, and subscribe, because justice isn't just his name, it's everything that followed. The Appalachian forest hadn't seen the sun yet, but the sky was already bleeding light. In the hush before dawn, the world outside Malik Turner's cabin stood frozen, drenched in a thick blanket of winter mist, the kind that makes pine trees whisper secrets and ghosts linger longer than they should. Inside, Malik stirred from another broken night of sleep, jaw clenched, sweat damp on his temples. The nightmares had returned again, always the same, screaming brakes, his son's small hand, the shadow of a wild dog lunging. The sound that haunted him most wasn't the impact or the silence after. It was the cry, a father's scream that still lived in his ribs like a blade. Malik sat up, wiped his face, and reached for the mug of water by his bedside. Cold, bitter, just the way he liked it. Maybe it drowned the rest of the dream. He hadn't opened that front door in days. Supplies were stacked well, wood was chopped, the radio was off. That was his life now. Quiet, removed, a man stitched into solitude. But this morning, something itched beneath his skin. A feeling. Not dread, not urgency. Something subtler. A disturbance in the rhythm of the woods. He threw on a flannel shirt and padded barefoot to the front of the cabin. When he opened the door, he didn't expect to see a silhouette against the fog. He didn't expect stillness so perfect it felt staged. On the edge of his porch sat a German shepherd. Not just any dog, but a big, soaked, black and tan mother with eyes like molten glass. Her ribs were showing. Her coat was slick with dew and blood, and gripped softly in her mouth, hanging limp like a rag doll, was a puppy. They locked eyes. Malik's breath caught. Not fear, something deeper, recognition. Not of the dog, but of the posture, the desperation, the silent plea. The mother stepped forward and laid the puppy at his doorstep. It let out a faint, choking whimper, then went still. The mother sat back, staring into Malik's soul like she was begging for something words could never carry. His stomach twisted. He took an involuntary step back, hand already moving toward the nail by the door where the old shotgun hung. Old instincts, old scars. The memory of a dog's snarl, his son's scream, the blood pooling on the street thick and fast. It all came flooding back in a single blink. But this dog, she didn't snarl. She didn't even whine, just stood there, ears back, tail low, eyes wide and unblinking. Hell no, he muttered under his breath, chest heaving, retreating one step into the cabin. Not again, not this time. But then he looked at the pup, barely bigger than a football, muzzle twitching, breathing ragged. There was a line across its neck like a collar had been yanked too tight. Malik crouched, just inches away now. The mother didn't move, didn't flinch, letting him approach, trusting him. "What the hell happened to you?" he whispered, his voice cracking at the edges. He hovered a hand over the puppy's belly. No growl, no tension, just a shallow rise and fall. He felt the cold seep through its fur. Without thinking, he reached for the flannel wrapped around his waist and folded the pup in it. The dog mother exhaled, slow and heavy. It wasn't relief, it was surrender. Malik carried the bundle inside, pushing the door open with his foot. His cabin, once an impenetrable fortress of silence and loss, now held a new kind of weight, a fragile, pulsing weight wrapped in flannel and pain. He laid the puppy near the fireplace and stoked the embers back to life. The soft glow kissed its shivering body. The mother stood by the door, unmoving. Rain started tapping lightly against the roof, as if the sky itself had waited for the right cue. "You can come in," Malik said hesitantly, not looking up. She didn't move. "You're not like them," he added, voice low. "You're not the one." He set a bowl of water by the door and walked back to the fire. He stared at the pup. Every so often gasped a sharp inhale like it was remembering how to breathe. Malik whispered, "Don't you die on me, little man." The crackle of the fire, the breathing of the dog, the weight of everything unspoken. It all filled the space that used to echo with Malik's grief. The dog mother lay outside the door, curled in the rain, keeping silent vigil. When Malik finally sat back and watched the pup's chest rise more steadily, he felt something shift. Not peace, not healing, just a tremor. The crack. Maybe it was him. The wind picked up slowly, whispering through the pine needles like a warning that something stronger was on its way. Inside the cabin, the fire cracked softly while Malik hovered over the small German Shepherd pup, still wrapped in his flannel shirt. Its breathing had evened out slightly, but its body remained limp. Shallow rise, shallow fall. A haunting rhythm. He reached out, fingers trembling more from memory than fear, and pulled back the cloth near the pup's neck. That's when he saw it. A torn leather collar, too tight, embedded. Malik's breath caught as he leaned in. Around the pup's throat was a strip of coarse brown leather. Snapped at one end, the buckle rusted and stained. But worse than the collar was what it had done, the way it had burrowed into the dog's flesh, leaving behind a dark, wet trench of raw skin. Dried blood clung to the edges, and the fur was patchy, missing in places. This wasn't just neglect. It was deliberate. A dog kept chained, pulled too hard, for too long, abused, discarded. He swallowed hard. His hand hovered again, fingers twitching like they remembered the weight of another body, another neck, another moment where time had collapsed and a scream had filled the air, only to be met with silence. He had knelt like this before, over his son, his baby boy, breathing shallow, bones broken, eyes wide but vacant, and Malik's hands, but they hadn't saved, they hadn't done enough. Now here they were again. Same posture, different soul. A whimper snapped him back. The puppy shifted slightly under the shirt. Not awake, not alert, but not gone either. Malik clenched his jaw, then reached for his multi-tool on the mantel. He flicked the blade out and gently, very gently, began to cut through the leather. Each stroke was careful, precise, as though removing that collar meant more than just freeing the pup, as if in some twisted cosmic way it was a second chance, not to fix the past, but to honor it. When the last of the collar came loose, Malik stared at it in his palm, frayed, wet, reeking of piss, fear, and something else, something metallic, almost burnt. He wrapped it in a rag and shoved it into the fireplace without a word. The flames licked it quickly, curling the leather until it shriveled to blackened ash. Thunder rumbled in the distance. He turned toward the door, thinking to tell the mother her pup was safe now, but stopped. She hadn't moved, still outside, still silent. Rain had started to fall, not heavy yet, but cold, slicing down in stiff vertical lines. Her coat was matted now, fur sticking to her ribs, ears lowered but eyes. "He's okay, you can come in." She didn't respond, didn't growl, didn't wag her tail. She just remained there, on the edge of the porch, front paws planted like anchors and back legs trembling slightly from the cold. She blinked once, slow, deliberate, but didn't cross the threshold. Malik stepped closer to the doorway, pausing under the frame. His eyes narrowed. There was no leash, no command, nothing holding her back, except something invisible, something ancient, a kind of law animals followed better than humans ever could. She had delivered the pup, that was her role. The rest, whether he lived or died, was no longer in her control. The wind howled suddenly, and the rain thickened into sheets. Malik could feel it soaking into his socks, pooling on the wooden boards of the porch. He looked down at her again, and she looked up at him for a fraction of a second. Their eyes locked, and in that moment he saw something unbearable: guilt, regret, but also trust. It shook him. He stepped back inside and left the door open. The storm came hard. Rain thrashed the side of the cabin, rattling the shutters and throwing branches across the lawn like toys. Lightning flashed behind the treetops, carving skeletal shadows through the fog. The fire hissed slightly as water crept beneath the frame of the window. Malik grabbed a towel and returned to the pup, drying its paws and ears. He rubbed warmth back into its body, whispering things he didn't even register. He was saying just sounds, half prayers, like lullabies from a man who never learned how to stop grieving. He glanced at the doorway. The mother was still there, soaked, shivering, but unmoving. She'd curled up just beyond the frame, her body shielding the entrance like a guardian who could not cross the border she herself had drawn. Every few minutes, she would lift her head and sniff the air, then rest again. Always watching, Malik brought a blanket and gently laid it across her back without saying a word. She led him. That, in itself, was extraordinary. A feral dog, wounded, frightened, mother to a dying pup, allowing a man to lay something over her. No flinch, no snarl, just a long exhale. Like maybe for the first time in days she could allow her muscles to unclench. Thunder cracked again, louder now. Malik sat in the doorway watching the storm with her. Neither spoke, of course, but neither moved either. They both understood what was happening. This wasn't just weather. This was reckoning. This was baptism. And as the rain came down harder, flooding the porch, the forest beyond vanished into gray nothingness. The fire behind them glowed warmer, casting long shadows across the floor where the pup stirred beneath the flannel, its breathing now steady. Still fragile, still broken, but alive. And then, just barely, Malik heard a sound from deep in the woods. Not thunder, not wind. A different sound, something unnatural. He stood slowly, narrowing his eyes toward the tree line, listening. The dog mother lifted her head too, ears twitching. She heard it too. The storm outside roared louder, pressing against the cabin like a living thing, as if the wind itself was angry at the silence inside. Matilda sat near the fire, eyes on the pup, every muscle in his body tight as a bowstring. The little body had gone too still. The rise and fall of its chest, which had been weak but rhythmic, was suddenly gone. His heart skipped. He leaned in closer, pressing his fingers gently against its ribs. Waiting, still nothing. Then he pressed his ear to its side. No breath, no heartbeat. For one full second, the world around him vanished. There was no storm, no rain, no fire. Just Malik, the pup, and the ghost of another child who'd once laid still in his arms. His throat closed up. He blinked, but his eyes burned. Not. He grabbed the pup, its head lolling to one side, and placed it gently on a towel in front of him. His hands hovered, uncertain, shaking. Then muscle memory took over. 15 compressions. 2 breaths. Check, repeat. The CPR training from his army medic course flooded back uselessly the day he lost his boy, but now, maybe, he pressed down, 2 fingers over the pup's ribcage, counting under his breath. 2, 3. His voice cracked, his shoulders tensed. The tiny body beneath his hands didn't move. Come on, little man. He tilted the pup's head, opened its mouth, cleared the airway like he'd been taught. Its tongue was dry and pale. He leaned in, hesitating only for a split second before sealing his lips gently over its snout and blowing a small puff of air. Then again. He checked the chest, still nothing. Thunder cracked outside like the sky was breaking open. The fire behind him hissed. He went again. Compressions, breaths. Come back, he whispered, tears breaking free and sliding down his cheeks for the first time in years. Please, come back. The weight of it all crushed him. The cabin wasn't big enough to hold the scream buried in his throat. He saw his son's face, remembered the last time he'd held him, remembered how his hands had trembled then too. He hadn't saved him. He hadn't been fast enough, not strong enough. But maybe now. He stopped mid-compression. The pup's paw jerked slightly. Then again, a weak gasp, shallow but unmistakable, lifted its chest. Malik froze, and then a sound tore through the porch. A short, mournful, rising howl. Not loud but full of pain. He rushed to the door and found the mother still curled at the threshold. Head lifted toward the sky, her body was swaying slightly. Her howl cut short, and in the same moment she collapsed, legs buckling beneath her. Damn it, Malik hissed, sprinting outside into the rain. Water soaked him instantly, but he ignored it. He knelt beside her and immediately saw the blood. Thick, dark, oozing from her rear leg. It pooled beneath her on the porch, mixing with rainwater into a reddish stain. The wound wasn't fresh, but it had split wide, likely from standing too long in the cold, the muscle too strained to hold. She didn't resist. Her eyes fluttered shut, and for one horrible moment, he thought she was gone too. No, 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 hell no, Malik muttered through clenched teeth, hands already moving. He scooped her up, shocked by how light she was, all bones and wet fur, just skin and a soul too stubborn to break. He carried her inside, past the threshold she wouldn't cross herself. As the door swung shut behind them, Malik felt it. That door had always been a wall, a boundary between him and the past, between him and... He hadn't let anyone, human or animal, pass that line since the day he buried his boy. But now, it wasn't a barricade. It was a promise. He laid the mother down on a thick blanket beside the fire, her body trembling under his hands. The pup, now breathing, whimpered faintly at the scent of her, trying to drag itself toward her side. Malik moved them together, careful, placing the pup against her chest. The mother stirred. Her eyes flickered open. She saw him, saw her pup, and exhaled. It was soft, so soft, but Malik knew what it meant. She'd held on just long enough, trusted just long enough. Rain still thundered outside, but in here, time slowed. The warmth of the fire glowed against the cabin walls. The scent of wet fur and blood mingled with smoke. Malik grabbed an old medical kit from the back closet, and his old army bag, dusty but intact. He didn't hesitate. His hands, still trembling, began to clean the wound, muttering to himself to stay focused. He didn't think about the boy anymore. Not directly, but he felt him, in the room, in the way his hands moved, in the way his breath came in tight, sharp exhales. The storm pounded the roof, but it couldn't drown out the sound of that heartbeat now. The pup's small whimpers, the mother's shallow breaths. Malik worked in silence, wrapping her leg tight, checking her pulse, laying his hand on her chest to feel the rhythm inside her. Alive, for now. He leaned back, wiping sweat and tears from his face with the same towel he'd used to warm the pup earlier. The firelight flickered across his tired face, and for a long moment, Malik just sat there on the wooden floor, between two wounded animals, breathing with them. Outside, the wind screamed through the trees. Inside, Malik closed his eyes and listened. Morning came slow, like it wasn't sure it wanted to. The fire had burned down to embers, casting soft orange shadows against the log walls. Malik stirred first, his back sore from sleeping on the hardwood floor, his flannel shirt damp with sweat and fur. For a few seconds he didn't move, letting the faint smell of wood smoke and rain soak into his lungs, trying to decide if the night before had really happened or if grief in memory. But then he heard it. Not a bark, not a whimper, just breathing. Shallow, raspy, but steady. He looked down. The pup, smaller than a loaf of bread, was curled into a tiny comma against the tattered edge of the blanket, fast asleep. Beside it, though, nothing. The mother was gone. The blanket she had lain on was soaked but empty. The gauze he'd wrapped around her leg unraveled in a bloodied coil. Malik sat upright, heart quickening. No, he muttered, pushing to his feet. No, no, no. The door was still shut, bolted from the inside. He unlatched it and stepped out barefoot onto the porch. The cold hit him first, then the silence. Snow had dusted the forest floor overnight, a soft white veil stretching across the trees. But near the cabin steps, he could see it, drops of blood. Not puddled, not splashed, just a quiet, deliberate trail. They led down the steps, past the woodpile, and vanished into the forest like footprints erased by time. Malik followed them barefoot for several yards, his soul stinging with cold and damp, eyes darting between brush and trees. He called out softly, "Girl, hey, I'm here. I'm not gonna let you," but his voice faded into the emptiness. Only the wind answered him, rustling through the pine needles overhead, lifting flakes of snow into soft spirals that danced and dissolved before touching ground. The deeper into the trees he went, the fainter the trail became. Drops of blood, then smears, then nothing, just a vast hush. And then he saw it. At the base of an old cedar tree, lying on the snow like it had grown there, was a small stick nut. Across, two thin branches lashed together with a piece of vine or twine or something ancient. It stood upright, tilted slightly, as if someone or something had placed it there purposefully. Malik stared at it for a long time, not because he believed dogs could make crosses, but because the symbolism struck something so deep it nearly knocked the breath out of him. The placement, the silence, the absence. The dog hadn't just died, she had chosen to go. Somewhere private, somewhere quiet. The cross wasn't hers, it was his. A message, maybe not in words but in gesture. I've done what I could. Now it's your turn. He didn't cry. Not this time. He just turned around, numb, and walked back toward the cabin, the frozen leaves crunching under his feet. Back inside, the pup was still sleeping, curled tightly, belly rising with effort. Malik knelt down, gently touched its side and felt the faint rhythm of life beneath his palm. He looked at its ears, still too big for its head. One flopped sideways like a bent antenna. Its nose twitched in its sleep. He didn't realize he was smiling, just barely. Malik sat there for a while, the silence pressing in like a warm, wet cloth. The fire needed stoking, the floor needed cleaning, but none of that mattered yet, not now. He whispered, "You need a name." The pup stirred. His voice was softer now, more deliberate. A real name. He reached into the breast pocket of his old army jacket and pulled out a picture. It was worn, corners curled from years of being folded and refolded. A boy, maybe 7 years old, sat smiling wide with his front teeth missing, his arm draped over a big yellow dog. Both looked into the camera like they knew something the world didn't. "Justice," Malik whispered. The pup didn't respond, of course, but the name echoed in the room, strange and sacred. He said it again, this time louder. "Justice." The pup blinked, eyes still foggy with sleep, then yawned so wide his tiny ribs flexed. "That's your name now," Malik said, almost to himself. "You're gonna carry it. Not for me, for him." He stood up, crossing to the window, the early sun now bleeding through the frost in soft streaks of gold. The world outside looked clean, untouched, but Malik knew better. Beneath every quiet morning was a night full of ghosts. He turned back toward the pup, now half sitting up, trying clumsily to stand. Its legs were wobbly, body still recovering, but determination burned in its eyes. Malik nodded. "You live," he said, barely above a whisper. "You hear me? You live. You live so damn hard this world doesn't know what hit it." The pup fell forward onto its side with a grunt, then rolled onto its back, tail wagging once slow, unsure. Malik cracked a smile. "Yeah, you get it. You live for him, for me, for her." He turned toward the door. The cross, the forest, the emptiness left behind. He knew there was more to this than a dog and a storm. Something had brought them here, something unfinished, and justice. The days passed slowly, as if the cabin had slipped outside the clock's reach, and the world beyond the tree line no longer mattered. The snow melted, just a little more each morning, and the ground grew muddy near the porch, heavy with thaw and memory. Inside, Malik's routine grew precise: feet, clean, train, repair. But the center of every hour was justice. The pup had begun walking, then stumbling, then trotting across the floor in short, excited bursts. His legs were still thin, his chest narrow, but his recovery was remarkable. What struck Malik most wasn't the speed of it, but the sharpness, the clarity. This wasn't a typical dog's rebound. There was focus in his eyes, an alertness beyond his age. He watched everything, heard everything, like he was constantly cataloging the world, learning without being taught. One morning, while prepping food, it clanged hard against the wooden floor, a sharp bang that would have startled any pup. But Justice didn't flinch. Instead, he turned sharply toward the sound. Posture stiff, then calmly resumed watching Malik's hands. No panic, no fear, just readiness. Malik narrowed his eyes. "That's nothing," he muttered. Later that day, out of instinct more than plan, he tested something old, something buried. He stood in front of Justice, palms visible, and gave a sharp hand signal, closed fist to the right shoulder. The dog froze. Then, without hesitation, sat down perfectly straight, eyes forward. Malik's breath caught. He hadn't used that command in nearly a decade. It wasn't something you taught at puppy school. It was military canine training. Another signal, fingers pointed downward in a fast arc. Justice dropped low into a crouch, silent, controlled. Malik stepped back slowly, heart thudding, mind reeling. This couldn't be coincidence. He gave the signal again. Immediate response. Then again, each time perfect execution. Malik knelt, ran a hand along Justice's back slowly, firmly. "Who the hell trained you?" he whispered. The pup blinked. Malik tried voice commands next, sharp, clipped tones, single-word triggers from his deployment years. "Halt!" The pup froze mid-step. "Sweep!" The pup began a circular perimeter walk along the cabin floor. "Track!" The dog stopped, looked up, awaiting assent. Malik stood still, the air inside him charged. He didn't know what he was feeling, admiration, fear, awe, but it coiled around his ribs tight. He hadn't been near a dog this disciplined since his last mission in Kandahar. And this one wasn't even 6 months old. That night, the fire crackled gently, and Justice slept curled at the foot of his cot, snoring softly. Malik stared at the ceiling, thoughts racing. Something didn't add up. He needed answers. The next morning, while brushing the pup's coat with a firm bristle brush, Malik noticed something odd near the back of the neck. An unusual patch of fur that grew slightly off. Beneath it, he felt a small, hard bump, smooth under the skin. Not a tick, not scar tissue. This was something embedded. He ran to the shed, grabbed his old flashlight and magnifier, and knelt beside Justice again. The bump was oval, no bigger than a dime. A faint metallic glint reflected from under the skin. His breath caught. "Is that a damn chip?" he muttered. Carefully, he pressed around the edges, feeling its outline. Definitely not pet grade. Too deep, too precise. Malik had worked with enough canine units to know what standard registry chips felt like: cheap, soft-shelled, placed in the shoulder. This was different. This felt installed. His thoughts turned cold. He dug through a box in his old footlocker until he found the handheld scanner he used to train with, half-rusted, barely holding charge. He plugged it into an ancient solar charger, waited for it to blink green, then brought it near Justice's neck. A pause, a faint chirp, then the screen lit up. The numbers flickered, then froze. Malik leaned in. There it was, a string of characters: ID 3 FAG 1179 CAC. Beneath that, blinking in red letters, 3 words that chilled the marrow in his spine: restricted data. Level black. Malik dropped the scanner. It hit the floor with a soft thud. His heart thundered. Level black was above top secret. That wasn't even standard military. That was ghost territory. He sat back, eyes wide, mind turning through every possibility. None of them good. "What the hell are you, Justice?" he whispered. The pup sat quietly, tail twitching once, gaze locked on him with almost human stillness. Like he knew. Like he'd been waiting for this moment too. The snow had melted for good now, and the ground outside Malik's cabin was soft with mud and dead pine needles. The way the forest always smelled just before spring claimed it back. Justice had grown stronger, faster, and smarter by the day, adapting to Malik's every word, every gesture, with a speed that felt less like learning and more like remembering. But the silence that came with the pup was unnatural, eerily constant. Especially for a dog so young. He didn't bark at deer or the rustling of trees. He didn't growl at shadows or strangers in the distance. He was too quiet, too controlled, and Malik had learned to stop thinking of him as a puppy altogether. One afternoon, while rummaging through the drawer beneath the workbench for batteries, Malik found something he hadn't touched in years: a small kitchen timer shaped like an egg, painted white with a fading blue stripe. He twisted the dial without thinking, and the ticking began immediately. A soft, crisp kick-tick-kick, steady and hypnotic. Justice was lying on the floor near the fireplace, eyes half closed in rest. The moment the sound began, his body snapped upright like a spring. Ears pricked, nose lifted, eyes locked onto the device. Malik froze. Justice didn't growl, didn't move toward the noise. He just stared, absolutely still, every muscle taut. The ticking continued. Malik watched him carefully. The pup didn't blink. His chest barely moved. It was as if the sound triggered something buried, something deeper than obedience. Malik turned the dial back and stopped the timer. The ticking ceased. Instantly, Justice exhaled and looked away, body softening like the spell had broken. Malik set the device down slowly. That reaction hadn't been curiosity, it had been programming. He ran his hands over his face and sighed. Whatever training Justice had received, it was deeper than surface commands. This wasn't canine police work. This was something colder, sharper. Malik had known that level of control once, back when he worked black site security in Kuwait briefings where even officers didn't speak names out loud. Places where dogs weren't just used to track or protect but to trigger, to kill. Later that night, Malik booted up an old encrypted laptop he hadn't touched in years. Powered by a solar cell he'd re-rigged after the last winter storm. He waited for the connection to stabilize, then navigated to a secure dead-drop server buried behind layers of digital noise. He typed in the code from the chip scanner, 3FAG1179XU9XXX. No name, just the code and one message, ping for protocol reference. Then he sent it. He didn't sign it, didn't identify himself, but he knew the one man on the other end would recognize the ping pattern. Call sign, Corvus. It was a name only one person knew him by now, Darius Monroe, a former military intelligence operative turned off-good analyst. They'd served together in Basra, then lost contact after a mission gone sideways in Sudan. If anyone could decode that chip, it was Darius. 3 days passed, no reply. Malik went about his routines, but he watched the woods more carefully now, listened to every plane overhead, noticed when the squirrels vanished too fast. On the morning of the 4th day, around 6 o'clock a.m., Justice stood frozen by the window, ears perked, not barking, not whining, just alert. Malik followed his gaze. Down the gravel road, about 500 meters out, a black SUV sat idling. The glass was tinted too dark for rural vehicles. No plates. Malik stepped onto the porch, shotgun slung but not raised, pretending to check the woodpile. From that distance, he saw the driver's side window lower slightly. A figure inside, male, clean-shaven, maybe late 30s, lifted a camera lens. Click, click. Then the SUV rolled away slowly, turning into the trees without so much as a tire screech. Malik didn't chase. He didn't have to. The posture, the stillness, the way the man scanned the tree line before leaving, it wasn't civilian. That was a military walk. Probably an ex-agency. Maybe not American. Malik clenched his jaw. Someone had seen the chip data. Someone had traced the ping. That night, he didn't sleep. Justice paced the length of the cabin 3 times, always pausing by the window before lying down again. Malik sat at the table, staring at the open laptop, now dark and lifeless. His breath came slow and heavy, the same way it had in war zones. That waiting before the fire feeling. They'd found him, and they weren't done. The next morning, Malik didn't wait for signs. He started preparing. The black SUV's appearance, the strange silence after the data ping, and Justice's unnatural reactions all wove together into a rope tightening around his chest. He pulled his old trail cams from the closet, 3 dusty boxes with cracked screens and low batteries, and positioned them across the perimeter of the property. One facing the road, another aimed at the tree line where the SUV had lingered, and the third pointed toward the rear woods where Justice often wandered at night. The last one he placed higher in the trees, camouflaged with pine bark, angled to overlook the clearing just beyond the creek. He didn't expect anything immediate, but instinct told him the game had changed, and whatever came next wouldn't knock. By midnight, the house was still. The fire burned low. Malik sat alone at the table, sipping cold instant coffee, the laptop open to a diagnostic screen, tracking the trail cams. Every feed was quiet. Justice lay curled by the door, tail twitching occasionally but otherwise calm. Malik leaned back in his chair, eyelids heavy. He hadn't been asleep more than 20 minutes when the first alert pinged through the system, soft, repetitive. Feed 3. Movement. Rear woods. He jolted upright, slammed his mug aside, and pulled the image into full screen. The footage was grainy, half fogged from frost, but clear enough to see her just at the edge of the trees. The mother. Still thin, still soaked in the posture of grief, but undeniably alive. Her fur was darker now, matted with pine needles. Her gait limping slightly but steady. She stood motionless, watching the cabin, not approaching, just watching. Justice didn't stir. She stayed like that for nearly 40 seconds, unmoving, her body silhouetted by moonlight. Then something shifted. From the right edge of the frame, a second figure entered. A woman, dressed in weather-worn fatigues, short cropped hair tucked beneath a wool cap, face mostly hidden by shadow. She placed a gentle hand on the dog's shoulder, crouched, whispered something inaudible, and the dog turned. They vanished into the trees together without a sound. Malik froze. His breath caught mid-chest. Even without seeing her face, he knew Dr. Rachel Moraine. He hadn't seen her since Bagram 8 years ago. She'd been the lead vet during Operation Shadowpath, the one who oversaw canine trauma recovery after live fire recon. She disappeared shortly after the war crime investigations surfaced. Word was she turned whistleblower, then vanished completely. So why was she here? He didn't sleep again. At 3:42 a.m., Justice snapped awake without warning. No sound had triggered it, no movement in the house. He stood like someone had thrown a switch in his brain, ears pinned back, legs tense. Then came the sound of a low, haunting trill that wasn't quite a growl. Malik reached for the rifle instinctively. Before he could stop him, Justice bolted through the door, shoving it open with his shoulder and disappearing into the woods like a shadow ripped free from the floor. Malik shouted once, grabbed his flashlight and boots, then followed. Branches slapped his face as he crashed through the underbrush, flashlight bouncing wildly, barely keeping up with the blur of black and tan darting through trees. Justice didn't slow. He moved like he knew exactly where he was going. The trail curved around the back creek and up a steep ridge Malik hadn't climbed in years. His lungs burned, knees protested, but he kept running until Justice stopped suddenly at the base of a large, ancient pine. The dog pawed at the roots, tail stiffened, ears angled back. Malik caught up, dropped beside him, and saw immediately something metallic glinting beneath the damp leaves. He pushed aside the dirt and moss, fingers scraping bark and mud, until he uncovered a rusted tin container the size of a hardback book. Its lid was sealed with duct tape and old army twine, the edges waterproofed with melted candle wax. Malik cut it open with his belt knife. Inside, a folded cloth, military-grade microphone pouch, and at the very bottom, a USB drive black, stamped with a silver insignia he hadn't seen in years. The emblem of Rapid Response Task Force Echo, the Shadow Division of Joint Special Operations Command. Force level black. Malik stared at the drive. It pulsed once, faint red light blinking alive as if it recognized him. He held it like it was because maybe, just maybe, it was. Malik didn't bring the USB back into the cabin right away. He stood in the clearing for a long time, the cold soil soaking through his jeans, the hum of blood in his ears louder than the whispering wind. Justice paced nearby, occasionally glancing toward him, as if aware that something deep and irreversible had just been uncovered. Malik eventually wrapped the drive in cloth, tucked it into his inside jacket pocket, and made the long walk back home in silence. Once inside, he bolted the door, turned off every light, and sat alone in the farthest corner of the room. The laptop open in front of him like a portal to something he wasn't sure he wanted to see. He inserted the USB. The screen blinked twice, then blacked out. Then a command line prompt appeared, enter authentication code. He hesitated, tried his old military ID number. Access denied. Then he typed, Corvus 117. The screen flickered again, then unlocked. A directory opened. Folders. Dozens. Some labeled Pulse_Division. Others LivTap. And one simply Collateral_Reports. Malik's hands hovered over the keyboard. He clicked into Pulse_Division. The first document was a mission brief dated 6 years earlier, signed by an organization he thought had been disbanded. JSTOC Tier 6 Applied Warfare Division. The file outlined Operation Black Pulse, a covert experimental program that merged canine military obedience with biochemical payloads. Dogs trained not just to detect but to deploy small capsules of engineered viral compounds carried inside modified harnesses. The targets: insurgent compounds in civilian zones. No witnesses, no evidence, no trace. Malik's stomach turned. He kept reading. The dogs were conditioned with stimuli, auditory clicks, countdown tickers, GPS anchors. Once deployed, they would blend into local environments, then activate under remote command. A faster, deniable alternative to drone strikes. Cheaper, less detectable. Terrify. He opened a video log. It showed a training facility, a desert-like mock village, and handlers in black masks guiding German shepherds through exercises. One of the dogs in the clip wore a collar with a faint yellow stripe down the side. the same as Justice's old collar. Malik paused the frame, zoomed. It was him, smaller, younger, but it was him. Justice had been part of this. The next folder hit harder. Live Takelog Phase 5. It referenced a contained civilian grid outside Fallbridge, an off-the-book test village created with abandoned housing near an old refinery. Date, March 17th. 4 years ago. Malik's breath caught. That was the same week his son died. Same region. He kept scrolling, eyes dry and burning. The incident report was simple, clinical. Subject K911A breached perimeter. Handler misfire. Detonation at incorrect grid sector. Civilian death, 1 confirmed. Secondary casualties, 2 injured. Project temporarily suspended. Malik felt the room spin. He clicked the embedded GPS tag. The map loaded. The blast site glowed red on the satellite overlay. He pulled up archived weather data, traffic logs. Then he saw it. A child's bike in the corner of the screen, burned, abandoned, just yards from the epicenter. His lungs seized. He remembered that day like a wound. The call, the officers, the way no one would explain what kind of construction test was being done in that part of town. He had buried his boy without knowing why. Now he knew. Justice didn't just survive. He had been there. The only surviving dog, according to the casualty log, extracted by an unauthorized party during evacuation identified only as Asset RM. Rachel Moraine. She had taken Justice, rescued him from the wreckage, and hidden him. For 4 years, until now Malik stared across the room at the dogs sleeping beside the fire, unaware of the ghosts swirling around them. Or maybe not unaware. Maybe Justice remembered everything. Maybe he never forgot. Malik's hands trembled on the keyboard. He opened the final folder. Unfenstal, Faith. And there, in clean Arial text, were 5 names. One of them was Malik Turner. Not as a handler, not as an observer, as a potential liability. It took Malik 48 hours to make the decision, and when he did, it wasn't with rage or vengeance. It was with grief sharpened into clarity. He didn't send the data to the press or social media. He knew better than that. He encrypted it with a dynamic keychain and sent it through 4 dead-drop servers to a secure cloud, used only by war crimes investigators and whistleblower watchdog groups anonymous. Irreversible traces. Then he sent one final message to Darius. The world will know. Protect yourself. The file was titled Black Pulse Final Directive, and it included not just technical documents and mission logs, but satellite maps, casualty rosters, and video evidence of live field testing that couldn't be refuted. Malik didn't include his name. He didn't need to. Justice's training footage spoke louder than any testimony could. When it was done, he shut the laptop, walked to the wood stove, and sat beside Justice on the floor, resting his hand gently on the dog's back. "They'll come," he said softly. "I'm ready." By the next morning, Darius was dead. Malik heard about it through a contact buried inside a private veterans comms network, a short message encrypted with the same cipher they'd used in Basra. Corvus, Diaz gone accident. Single car off bridge. No brake marks, no autopsy. Malik didn't need more details. He stared at the screen until the letters blurred, until he had to look away before his hands shook hard enough to draw. Darius had known the risks, had helped anyway, and now he was gone, erased like he'd never mattered. Like his silence wasn't loud enough to echo. That night, Malik sat by the fire and whispered Darius's name once, like a prayer. Justice lay beside him, ears twitching at every sound outside, but quiet as always. They both knew this wasn't over, not even close. 2 days later, the first message arrived, an untraceable email. No greeting, no signature. Just a single line of text. "We can keep you and the dog safe. In exchange, you'll sign him over. Full custody, no media." Attached was a digital contract from an international defense group Malik had only heard of once, Orion Shield Initiative. A coalition of ex-military operatives turned contractors, who worked security for governments, banks, private tech labs. They were legit, high-level, and very dangerous. The offer included immediate extraction, new identity relocation, financial protection, and immunity from any future prosecution. They'd wipe it all away. The war, the fallout, the chip, the blood. All he had to do was hand Justice over. Quietly. Permanently. He didn't respond that day. He read the message 3 times, thought about it, even looked out the window and imagined the life they were offering, a new place, no questions, no shadows. A house in the mountains, maybe somewhere warm, somewhere no one would ever know what Justice had been made to do. But the next morning, as Malik stood watching Justice stretch by the porch, ears perked toward the wind, tail wagging with a sleepy rhythm, he remembered the first time he'd held a cold, barely breathing, wrapped in flannel, a body he had carried like his son's ghost. Justice wasn't a weapon anymore. He wasn't an asset. He was family. Malik wrote one line back, "Justice is not yours. He is not mine. He is free. Try to take him and I will end you." He never got a reply. But that night, as he and Justice sat under the stars, a drone buzzed overhead for 12 seconds before vanishing. A warning. Malik stared up at the dark sky and whispered, "Let them come." The wind that morning came gentle, softer than it had any right to be. Malik stood at the edge of the ridge overlooking the valley where the frost still clung to the bark and the trees swayed like men standing at attention. The shovel was cold in his hand, the weight of it matched only by the weight he carried in his chest. Justice stood beside him, unmoving, eyes fixed forward, his gait slower now, more deliberate. He knew where they were. This was the place Malik had never brought him to before. The one stretch of earth he avoided like plague. A small clearing above the creek marked only by a smooth stone laid flat and unmarked. Beneath it lay the boy, Jamal Turner. 7 years old, never afraid of dogs, always asking questions about rockets and stars. Malik had chosen this spot because Jamal loved the sound of water. Even now he swore he could still hear his laughter bouncing off the canyon when the wind curved just right. Malik knelt slowly and dug a shallow hole at the foot of the stone, every motion quiet and reverent. He unzipped the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out 2 items, the black USB that had detonated the silence of his past, and the faded leather collar that once belonged to a dog who had given everything without ever barking once. He placed them both into a metal box, closed it tight, and pressed it into the earth, covering it inch by inch until only soil remained. His hands trembled not from cold, but from the finality of it. Some truths didn't need to be kept. Some had already been carried too far. When the last mound was shaped, he stood, brushing his palms clean, and looked to Justice. The dog had not moved from the grave. He sat with his chest tall, ears tilted forward and tail flat against the leaves. His eyes were locked on the stone, not blinking. After a long beat, he lay down slowly, resting his head on his front paws, body curled like he was bracing for something. Then it came, a sound Malik had never heard from him, a low hum, trembling, that rose into a long, sorrowful howl that cut through the morning like a blade. It echoed through the clearing, through Malik's ribs, through every breath the forest dared take. It was not pain, it was not warning, it was farewell. Malik lowered himself beside him and said nothing. He didn't have to. He placed a hand on Justice's back and left it there until the wind died down and the silence returned. Deeper now, more sacred. When they walked back to the cabin, neither looked back. Winter passed, then another fall. The world outside moved on as if it had never noticed the ghosts that had once paced Malik Turner's porch. The news cycle spun and forgot. No arrests were made, no headlines were printed. But Malik knew, and so did those who watched from the shadows. He still got the occasional ping-odd signals on his old comms array, a click on the landline with no caller ID, but they stopped sending threats. They understood now. Justice was not leverage, not anymore. He was protected by something no Black Ops team could breach. Justice had grown quieter with age, but not weaker. He roamed the woods like a sentinel, coming home only when the sun dipped low or when the scent of rain clung to the moss. Malik watched him from the porch most evenings, a cup of bitter coffee in hand, the sound of creaking trees reminding him that life never stopped moving, it only changed shape. Then, on the first frost morning of the new year, something unexpected happened. Malik heard a sound outside he hadn't heard in months, a scratch at the door. Not sharp, not frantic, just a soft, rhythmic tap. He opened it slowly, half expecting a deer, or maybe the wind had kicked loose a branch. But what he saw made his breath catch in his throat. A small dog sat at the bottom of the steps. A puppy, black and tan like Justice, but with a blaze of white along its snout. Its ears flopped sideways, oversized for its head, and in its mouth it gently held a stick. Note, a tiny piece of wood carved crudely into a cross. Malik's knees buckled slightly, and he gripped the doorframe. The pup looked up at him with round amber eyes, and he saw not identical, but familiar, embedded, bloodline deep. Behind the pup, just visible at the edge of the trees, stood Justice, older now, proud, silent, watching. The pup dropped the stick on the porch and wagged its tail once. Tentative. Malik crouched, eyes blurring with the burn he hadn't felt in years, throat tight. He reached out his hand. "Hey there," he whispered, voice cracking under the weight of everything he couldn't say. "Little Justice. If the story moved you, consider giving it a like and subscribing so you don't miss what comes next. What part of the journey hit you the hardest? Was it the truth behind Operation Black Pulse, or that final howl on the hill? And tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Drop a comment below, I read everyone.